Bond is usually on top of things and pretty smart, so he knows this guy that they get the plane from is gonna sell them out.
Well, he wanted you, but I left him the car as collateral. He'll make much more when he sells us out.
So why not knock the guy out, or tie him up, at least rip the phone out of the wall? I guess Bond is purposely looking for some trouble during this flight. We learn Camille used to be Bolivian Secret Service. It doesn't make her any more interesting to me. I'm sorry. Flash, whiz, gunfire, swoop, explosions, blurs. I've talked all about this. The climax to this woozy sequence is Camille and Bond free-falling with one parachute. I know Forrester took great pride in the fact that they went to this wind tunnel to capture the look of a more authentic free-fall on their faces, but I don't think it turned out as good as it should have. Their fall only lasts literally like 30 seconds, and I suppose that's more realistic than extended freefall drops we've seen in other films, but it looks a bit too cartoony for my taste. I don't like it as much as older freefall sequences where they relied on wide shots of stunt guys falling, cut with close-ups of the actor with solid blue backgrounds behind them, and hairdryers aimed at their faces. Yeah, Point Break did the same kind of last-second shoot opening landing much better. M is called to see the minister, and he talks about how the PM is mad. Green and their government's interests align. He doubts that Green is a bad guy, and even if he is, he rationalizes they would have to work with him anyway. They're in desperate need of oil. M is ordered to bring Bond in, or the Americans will kill him. There's a lot of good stuff. Unfortunately, it doesn't really play out or up the stakes of what's happening for Bond or the story. This is a scene I would think would be more towards the middle of the film. Once Bond is out there with M questioning his actions after some dubious encounters with members of Quantum, is he doing what he's doing because of his mission, or is he out of control, just bent on exacting retribution on those for Vespa?
Pull him in, or the Americans will put him down.
Now it's time to put even more heat on Bond with his own government and the CIA to begin gunning for him. His plate starts to get pretty full. Instead, this is a half hour before the end of the movie, and none of what the minister says comes into play. We never find out if this dude Guy Haines is influencing the PM with his decisions on this, if the government ultimately recognizes the existence of Quantum, or if they will just continue to do business with them, or if there will be any repercussions for those who knowingly were in bed with them. The CIA just hangs out in Bolivia and never seems to be trying to stop Bond. This ends up as simply a scene of M getting lectured. Hanging out in a sinkhole, Camille reveals her troubled past with the general.
He shot my father. He did things to my mother and my sister. And I strangled them while I watched.
Don't care. I'm sorry. I just don't care about this character, and I'm not interested in her story. I was more fixated on listening to Honey talk about selling her seashells.
This one is worth $50 in Miami. 50.
I don't really know what it is about this chick. Her story is just nothing special. I don't know anything about her other than this revenge thing of hers. I mean, does she even have a personality? She doesn't have any kind of chemistry with Bond, and she just feels like a distraction in all this. There are more distractions in Quantum than an actual story. It's crazy. They could have dropped so much of what's happening here and stuck with a simplified, slick story that drives like a bullet to the end. Instead, it's all these detours into crap and characters, and the basic story of Bond finding who is responsible for Vespa's death gets completely lost. Bond then literally stumbles onto the big secret of Green's, which is, he's not after oil, but Bolivia's water supply. After helping with a coup allowing the general to take power, Quantum is now in control of more than 60% of Bolivia's water supply, and will now make a nice profit overcharging this new government for it. Those little scamps. The repercussions of Green's plan on the population is shown via an arty stroll that Camille and Bond take. M is back now to personally take Bond back to London.
You said you weren't motivated by revenge.
I'm motivated by my duty.
No. I think you're so blinded by inconsolable rage that you don't care who you hurt.
Bond learns Fields is dead, Goldfinger style in oil. I'm not usually a fan of blatant references to past Bond films, but I kinda dig this. It's a nice tweak and update, and although it's clearly a homage to Shirley Eaton's death, it still leaves a visual impact. The only bad thing is that Forster doesn't give us a chance to appreciate it. As with most things in Quantum, the shot is rushed. He could have left the camera on her for a little bit longer, after all the time they must have spent setting up this death scene. These dissolves just ruin it. Bond is escorted out by agents, the elevator door closes, and... What's going on? The first time I saw this, I wasn't even sure how many agents Bond takes out here. I think it's 3. With a few dozen quick, confusing cuts, Bond is the last man standing. Anyone can be an action star with this rapid editing and handheld camera work that have become so popular nowadays. It's just a blur of action, limbs flailing around, bodies hitting the floor, and ta-da! That's all that needs to be said. Don't mess with them. You don't even have to look the part of an action hero today. Just let the editing and wobbly camera do all the work. You don't really have to choreograph the fight either. We'll just put that together later. Just swing your arms back and forth and... action. If you want to see a better Bond fight in an elevator, watch the scene from Diamonds Are Forever. Connery only fights one guy, but it's much, much more exciting than this.
There's nowhere to go. There's a capture or kill order out on you.
Who would have done that?
Bond escapes, and for some reason, M does a complete turnaround from her intention of putting a stop to Bond's rampage, to now letting him go.
Find out where he's going. He's onto something.
Mom, the CIA is
I
insisting...
don't give a shit about the CIA or their trumped-up evidence. He's my agent, and I trust him.
I'm not sure what happened. Maybe there was a phone call off screen that reignited her trust of him, or made her reconsider the repercussions of what will happen to her if she doesn't stop her agent. It's a mystery, and we'll never know the answer. Unless just saying the script says she now goes back to trusting Bond is enough for you. What's funny about this is another little drop thing. M tells Tanner to find out where Bond is going. Apparently Tanner loses Bond, because we never see M being informed that Bond is going to Hotel Desert to confront Green. Guess it's unimportant anyway. After a quick visit with Felix, telling Bond all the baddies are getting together at Hotel Desert, Bond escapes the CIA's one attempt at capturing him. They were a real menace to Bond. It's a good thing he took it upon himself to go to their office, or else they would have had absolutely nothing to do. Green's Hotel is a strange locale. This hotel is technically a real hotel to accommodate workers of the European Southern Observatory, so people do stay there. And it is pretty cool looking sitting there in this empty desert, so I can understand why the filmmakers decided to use it. But the way the movie says...
Green's bringing him his money now. A hotel called the Perla de las Dunas in the desert.
And then seeing it makes me go, what? It's somewhat a surreal way to use this place in the movie. Almost everyone I've talked with about Quantum couldn't get a handle on why would anyone build a hotel in the desert. Saying it's a hotel makes it sound like they have brochures and ice machines and package deals for tourists. I guess I can roll with it, but it's very odd. Even if this hotel was built by the bad guys, made for the sole purpose of it being used exclusively only by them, it's still pretty weird. I would have swallowed it easier if Felix had just said, "The bad guys are all meeting at their hideout in the desert." Our disorienting story culminates as Bond and Camille arrive at the hotel and set the baddies in their sights. We get a quiet moment between Bond and Camille as he offers her advice as to how to go about this personal kill. It's not a bad little scene. There's this big build-up to this meeting, where all the bad guys are coming together with the booming music and the long walk Green makes. We're supposed to feel real tension now that they're all going to be in one place and Bond is on his way. But somehow it all feels very anticlimactic. Since meeting the General, we haven't seen him do much devilish stuff. He's given off sinister looks now and then, but he's also getting screwed over by Green with this desert deal. We're told of the horrible things he did to Camille's family years ago, But I think the filmmakers felt they needed some more visceral examples to convince us that this guy deserves to die. So they have him target this one hotel employee. She's the only one apparently working in this joint. And to show us what a despicable guy he is. The general attacking this chick is supposed to mirror his crimes he committed against Camille's family, and demonstrate that Camille wanting to kill him is pretty reasonable. It feels too little, too late for me. And again, it doesn't make me care about Camille's journey or having the general get his comeuppance. And I'm going to repeat myself again. This Camille general story is just interrupting Bond's confrontation with Green now. And I hate it. Explosions rock through this combustible hotel. I guess the explanation for this is some kind of hydrogen fuel cells that power the joint. So I suppose it's like a Hindenburg thing happening here.
It's terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. All the humanity and all of...
And it looks like a lot of this place is made of wood, too. Parts of it look kind of woodish. The way the place is burning, it's like wood soaked in gasoline. Oh, Elvis gets killed in an explosion. As if anyone cared. Watching these two fights, I just don't feel connected to either one of them. The Camille one, you know how I feel about that. But even Bond and Green is swinging an axe, explosions going off everywhere. I don't feel like there was any build-up in the movie to this fight between Bond and Green. That Green is the key to finding out more about Quantum. It's like a lot of this movie has been teasing us with anticipation leading up to things, but it never delivers or sells the importance of it. There are a couple good shots here, with Bond leaping through the broken window, the scaffolding falling, but it's mainly me just watching two sets of fights, with fire going off all around, and I feel very removed from it all. In the end, Camille kills the general. Bond gets his info from Green, and leaves him out in the desert. Now after having killed the general, Camille doesn't know what to do, so Bond suggests she can use her knowledge she learned from Green to help undam the water or something. I don't know. And finally, she departs. So leaves the most forgettable Bond girl ever. Finally. In Russia, Bond confronts Vespa's boyfriend, as he's clearly making a play with another hot chick who works inside a government agency. This chick Corinne is pretty cute, by the way. Wish they had more of her in this flick. He informs M he didn't kill the guy, that she was right about Vespa.
Bond, I need you back.
I never left.
He symbolically throws Vespa's necklace away, and that's meant to show he is now able to move on and has found his solace. It really was a long, convoluted road to get to that. Oh boy. This was not a good Bond movie. And I am calling it a Bond movie. There was a lot of criticism about Quantum not feeling like a Bond movie. Plenty of fans described it as a Bourne knockoff, and not having the same elements that a Bond movie is supposed to have. The women, the gadgets, the romance, the humor, the fantasy world, the ultimate hero. And agreed, Quantum doesn't have a lot of that. But I still consider it a James Bond movie. It stars James Bond, and it's part of the official series. So whether I like it or not, it's a James Bond movie. Just a really, really bad one. I can't say it's worse than Die Another Day. For one thing, I don't like having to take back that trophy of worst Bond movie from it. It earned it. Although I can see how some fans would christen Quantum as the worst. The legendary bad Bond movies like Die Another Day and Moonraker, and I'm not a big Moonraker hater by the way, and the way they're viewed by fans, they're both perceived so epically bad and ridiculous that they become memorable. You can instantly think of awful moments from them, and automatically you're pulled immediately back into the distressing experience of watching them. Quantum is bad on a different level. It's completely joyless and forgettable. It's so incredibly dull, it doesn't reach the heights of a monumental disaster. It's just a numbing experience that leaves me feeling nothing. So I wouldn't call it the worst Bond film, but it is the most disappointing. After Casino Royale, and then hearing Quantum would be a sequel to it, I was so excited for it. I had such high hopes. I really wanted to love it. Then when I saw it, it was one of the biggest downers I've experienced in the Bond series. For those who like Quantum, cool. I really wish I was in your boat. But I'm not. For a Bond revenge movie, I'll take License to Kill over Quantum any day. There are a few things I like in Quantum. A few. Bond's fight with Slate, the bike flip, the dead geologist, Bond getting his hotel message, that was pretty cool. Bond and Camille getting ready to go to that hotel, that bathroom handle toss. Most of these are just moments though, and aren't enough to make me geared up to watch this movie again. All the actors here I think are pretty good. A lot of the returning actors from Casino Royale show up, and they're a treat to see. It would have been a lot better if they were given something to do though. None of them have much to work with. None are given clear motivations, and they just pop up and do what the story needs them to do to move things along, which is never in a clear direction anyway. Some characters were completely unnecessary. Olga just goes back and forth with Green the entire movie with no clear plan. No wonder it's taken her this long to kill the general. Doesn't seem like she knows what the heck she's doing. Almeric is a great actor in smaller art house films, but as a Bond villain, he's not scary or charismatic. There's not even any satisfactory catharsis when Bond finally meets him and they have their big final confrontation. Seeing Daniel Craig the second time around made me geared up to see where he was going to go with 007. Unfortunately, despite looking the part and ready to get to work, he's given very little to say or react to. Quantum might offer more action set pieces for Craig to do, but he gets lost in the rapid editing of them. There's very little time spent on Bond's motives for revenge, and how it ties to Green and Quantum. Mr. White was the main connection we knew from Casino Royale. We're teased with this big Quantum organization in the opera scene. But then the movie throws all of that aside.
Where the movie ends right now, there was another scene after that.
Oh yeah, that deleted ending that Forster shot but was never used, with Bond encountering Guy Haines and Mr. White. That would have finally picked up their story threads. I never saw the actual 1-minute scene, but supposedly would have showed us Bond continuing to move up the ranks of Quantum by catching up with Guy Haines, and teasing us with future adventures with them. Quantum would be the new Spectre. As enticing as the idea sounds and the possible setup for another direct sequel, it wouldn't have helped or saved what came before in the movie. It's a good thing it was deleted, and it wasn't the closing scene. I probably would have just felt even more frustrated by seeing it. Oh, now you're bringing these guys out? Where were they an hour ago? By the end of this, I guess the lesson Bond has learned is it's not always beneficial to kill.
Please. Make it quick.
But didn't he learn that in Casino?
Any thug can kill.
Shoot the big picture.
Is he still alive?
He is.
I'm surprised.
There are naturally multi-locations going on, and I really do like some of them. Location cards and all. And I don't even mind the color palette of browns, blacks, and whites that Forster decided to use. It has sort of a retro modern mesh to it. Yeah, I can see that. And most of it all looks visually cool. It's a pretty nice looking movie. But what actually takes place in those locations are either dull, rushed through, or completely confusing. It all becomes a joyless, chaotic experience with no wit or sharp dialogue. Just a movie that floats along without a clear story that's punctuated by those loud whiz, bang, crash action sequences that are not fun to watch. I still find it hard to believe Quantum's budget was in the neighborhood of $200 million. I watched this movie and I just don't see it. What did they spend it all on? I don't see it on screen. I realize filming in the desert is costly, but was that it? This has got to be the brownest looking James Bond movie ever. I don't think it's a mystery to what happened here and how things started to spiral out of control to result in this mess. It all goes back to the beginning, with that craziness involving the script and the rush to make this movie. Had they taken more time with it, and not had been in such a mad scramble to start production before that writer's strike hit, I think Quantum could have turned out much better. What can you expect when you show up to the set and the actors and the director are trying to make it up as they go? It's crazy. I'd be shocked if they ever attempted another Bond sequel again. They goofed this up so bad, I doubt they'd ever even consider doing it again. Bond films are huge productions, and I can't imagine if they start making one with such a hasty atmosphere in the beginning. It's a long shot that the movie will result in anything other than a disaster, and I think that's what happened. I still get amused by the idea of the selection of the title, Quantum of Solace. Yes, it's a title to a Fleming short story, but even the choice of that was last minute.
We just decided a few days ago.
But this one is an original Fleming title, and that was very important to us, and it really suits the film, so that's why we chose it.
It just seemed like they were trying to sell it without being able to back up the importance of its meaning to anything in their movie. You compare that to when the title Skyfall was announced, and after seeing the movie, learning what the meaning of it was, and getting that light bulb moment after all that wondering. With Quantum of Solace, people were still left wondering after seeing the movie. Even the president of Columbia, who were distributing Quantum with MGM, was quoted as saying he wasn't a fan of the title. He and his colleagues were finally won over by it when they realized Bond's 007 number could be inserted graphically into the title. Hence, it would help with the marketing of the movie. That's a real great reason for a title selection. Then we had the choice of Forster as director. He didn't have a background in big action productions, and with things being so shaky already when he signed on, that did him no favors. Had this just been a standalone Bond movie, Forster might not have been on the list of directors. But possibly because of the emotional tone the movie was going to run with from Casino Royale, the idea of hiring Forster seemed like it could work. It didn't. In Forster's defense, and I doubt I will ever utter that statement again regarding Forster and Quantum, the second unit shooting finished on June 12th, leaving Forster only 6 weeks to cut the movie, giving him only a fraction of the months-long period usually given for post-production. Forster had said there was just way too little time for post. That kind of stress I'm not really used to. I don't ever want to do that again. It's yet another example of how rushed everything on Quantum was.
A huge amount of bravery and a huge amount of visual flair, which is what we wanted from the movie, and we had to, we had a lot to compete with Casino Royale, so it was he had a lot to live up to, but he certainly did.
It's hard for me to judge what kind of stamp I'm going to put on this movie. I think I let the audience decide that. I just have my vision of the film and will pull that through and make the movie I think is the most interesting and most fascinating to watch.
I'm not sure Forster's stylistic and decorative vision for a Bond film was appropriate either. In some instances, some of his arty flourishes work reasonably well, but overall they look out of place in a Bond movie, and they just become too much. Then to compound the fact, he didn't seem to have any kind of vision for the action, and relied on rapidly cut Bourne-influenced action scenes that were almost unbearable to watch. I found it really amusing after Quantum premiered that Forster said he already declined directing the next Bond film, and eventually became more and more adamant he didn't want to do another Bond movie again. I've become suspicious of the supposed offer by Mike and Babs asking him to direct again. After the fallout of Quantum and the criticism it got, I'd be wary they were so keen on hiring him again. Plus the fact it didn't seem Forster was too happy with his experience working on Quantum. I suspect it was more of a friendly PR decision to say he was asked, and not as genuine an offer as he made it sound. But I'm just theorizing here. I have a feeling had Forster been signed to direct Bond 23, the majority of fans would not have been too happy with it. In fact, who would have caused the more outrage if they were to return to direct the next Bond film? Forster or Lee Tamahora? You have to choose one. However genuine an offer that was made, Forster would not be involved in Bond 23, and the producers would return to the tradition of hiring a British-born director. Casino Royale took in over $590 million at the box office, making it the highest grossing of all Bond films to date. Quantum managed to rise to that challenge, and while not quite beating that record set by the previous film, it still took in $586 million worldwide. Despite the financial success, Quantum had its share of critics, not even counting Bond fans. Martin Campbell said he felt Quantum completely lost its way. Roger Moore naturally chimed in, saying he enjoyed Daniel Craig, he thinks he's a damn good Bond, but the film as a whole, there was a bit too much flash cutting for me. It was just like a commercial of the action. There didn't seem to be any geography, and you were wondering what the hell was going on. But there you are. Call me old-fashioned and an old fuddy-duddy. Even Daniel Craig eventually came out, essentially saying he wasn't happy with the final results of Quantum, saying he would want to do better next time. He pointed to the writer's strike as a major factor with the disappointing results, and confessing when they started, they only had the bare bones of a script. He and Forster were forced to rewrite scenes themselves, with him admitting, "A writer I am not." And many of the decisions were being made on the fly and at the last second. Interestingly, he also mentioned that Quantum was never meant to be as much of a sequel as it was, but it ended up being a sequel, starting where the last one finished. Oh, and about the title of Quantum of Solace, Craig would later say the title was chosen more or less at random, with him saying that most Bond movie titles are meaningless anyway, and they hoped it would sound intriguing. As strange as some of Fleming's Bond titles might sound, most do have a connection to the actual story, and are somewhat relevant. The title, Quantum of Solace, didn't really connect with the script they had at the time, and the revenge story elements that actually made the title relevant were last-second additions. They never mentioned this at the press conference. This is why it's almost pointless to listen to all the hype, the promotional interviews, the press conferences, all that jazz with big upcoming movies. They're just feeding fans whatever they can to sell the movie and generate excitement and buzz.
I actually come back from shooting Superman 4, and I'm very proud of it.
We didn't want to, mess it up the third time.
See, I think it's the most reality-based movie we've done so far.
We do it the old-fashioned way, real live action. We didn't do a lot of CGI on the stunt stuff.
It's not a bad film. Not a bad film. It sometimes entertaining. I'm trying to be home.
We have to wait a few years to get the real story.
If I disappointed them in any way, then I really want to apologize.
Quantum was a step back in this reinvention of Bond. After the cataclysmic train wreck that was Die Another Day, the series bounced back with Casino Royale, so expectations were relatively high with what was going to come next. But the series once again bottomed out with one of the weakest and most disheartening Bond adventures. Now fans weren't sure if Casino Royale would be the exception to Craig's Bond, or the norm. Did he just luck out with a great Bond film to start with, and the rest of his tenure would be subpar follow-ups, not coming close to the superiority of his first outing? With only 2 films, it was impossible to determine just how the overall quality of the Craig reconstruction would be. Fans had a lot of questions, one being if the Craig films would continue this sequel pattern, and the organization of Quantum would reappear and become the new Spectre, threatening the world in subsequent films. Would Quantum actually become a fearsome presence in the movies? Unlike the quick 2-year gap between Casino Royale and Quantum, sinister forces were already gnawing away behind the scenes that would result in making 007 sit out of the movie game for much longer and cause Craig to take an unexpected hiatus. MGM found itself in financial trouble and near bankruptcy with over $4 billion in debt. Work on Bond 23 would be suspended. Concerns started to arise of when or if Bond would ever return to movie screens. And if this extended delay were to continue, would Craig be back in his tux? Or would he make an early departure, much the same way as Dalton did, leaving behind a 2-film Bond legacy? Finally, on November 3rd, 2011, 50 years to the day when Sean Connery was first announced as the first James Bond, the announcement of Bond 23 was revealed to the world. With a director with no previous big-budget action experience, a strange-sounding title, a film that would celebrate 50 years of the series' history, and Daniel Craig returning for his third performance as 007, fans would undoubtedly be a bit more skeptical at the excitement and confidence the filmmakers had for Bond 23.
No one really thought that we were going to get to 50 years of Bond.
Well, working with Sam is a dream come true.
I thought the story was fantastic. I love Daniel, I love Judy, and I wanted a huge challenge.
In doing a third one and being given and being lucky enough to get the chance to do a third one, it was my intention to sort of make the best Bond movie that we possibly could, and Bond with a capital B.
We had heard all these promises before.
You're going to get a phone call in a minute. Would you mind telling them I'm headed for Cairo?